evening. Welcome to the Tabletop District 2.
Good evening.
District 2 discussions with our two school board candidate members, Mr. Silkworth and Mr. Turnage. This evening's tabletop discussion is brought to you by a collective group who includes the Arundel County chapter of the NAACP, the Arundel Bay area of Jack and Jill, the Arundel County National Coalition of 100 Black Women, North Arundel County Alumnae Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta, and Zeta Phi Beta Sorority, RHOETAZETA Chapter. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we will be discussing with our candidates from District 2. You know, if we're gonna vote, we must be informed. And so tonight, we're gonna be informed by Mr. Turnage and Mr. Silkworth and why we should vote for them. Good evening again. Good evening, Mr. Silkworth and Mr. Turnage. This evening, we have just 3 questions that we will ask each one of you. And the first question is, and we're going to start with Mr. Silkworth. Tell us about yourself. What's your bio, and why do you deserve to be school board member running?
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening. My name is Robert Silkworth, and I am a 48-year veteran teacher here in Anne Arundel County Public Schools. I actually grew up in Brooklyn Park. My parents, Paul and Mildred, raised 6 of us. Our parents were really very dedicated to all of us. Our mom was a stay-at-home mom. My father actually worked 2 or 3 jobs sometimes. He was as committed to our family as any father could ever be. And you know, he only had a 6th grade education, but for me, he was the smartest man I ever knew. The values that he and my mother instilled in all of us have helped me in my career as an educator. Both of my parents stressed the importance of family, discipline, and of course, a good education to guarantee a secure future. I attended Park and Brooklyn Park Elementary Schools and then Brooklyn Park Junior Senior High School, a unique school with grades 7 through 12. That was the home of the bees. I was, in fact, class president for all 4 years in high school, which was actually the beginning of my leadership training. I graduated in 1967. After graduation from high school, I began my college studies at Towson University the fall of 1967. And you know, the Vietnam War was raging at that time. At the age of 17, my twin brother Ronald and I, we decided to enlist in the United States Army Reserves. So after the fall semester at Towson University, I was called to active duty. And after basic training at Fort Bragg in North Carolina, I was in fact trained as a LARC driver. That LARC is that amphibious craft used to transport both supplies and troops from ship to shore, as in the beaches of Normandy in World War II. My service was completed in 6 years. I returned to Towson University, graduated in 1972 with a major in education and French. I completed my student teaching actually at Annapolis Junior High School. And at that time, there were only 2 open positions in Anne Arundel County. One of them was at Glen High School, the home of the Gophers, and the other was at Southern Junior High School at the other end of the county. Yes. I lived in Baltimore County at the time. A very good friend of mine, Charlie Day, he was offered a position at Glen High School. And I was offered the position at Southern Junior High School. You know, Charlie spent his entire career at Glen High. Wow. He was, in fact, inducted to the Glen Hall of Fame there. Well, I taught at Southern Junior High School for 2 years, and in 1974, I was offered the position of department chairperson of the WCL department at Brooklyn Park High School, my alma mater, which, wow, of course, I accepted. In 1989, I taught at Brooklyn Park from 1974 to 1989, and in 89, Brooklyn Park was merged with Andover High School in North County to become North County High School, the home of the Knights. The interesting thing is that Andover was a small community school, Brooklyn Park was a small community school, and guess what? They put us together to make us a large school, and now what's everyone talking about? Small community schools.
Yes.
Well, in 1990, I was honored to be chosen as the chairperson of the World Classical Language Department by the principal, Bill Wentworth, the first principal at North County High. And I am actually still currently teaching there. And I'm really the only remaining teacher from that original staff.
Wow.
Mr. Wentworth, a principal, he taught us certain things. First, the power of the relationship. And then finally, he says, we all must plan our work and work our plan. Sounds simple, but it makes sense. Well, in November of 2019, I was honored by our current principal, Mr. Eric Jefferson, to be inducted into the North County Hall of Fame, the first class of people to be honored for their dedication to North County High. During my teaching career, I've been more than a teacher. I've been involved in many extracurricular activities. I coached basketball for 15 years, was part of the time when in Brooklyn Park we had 6 state championships in girls basketball. I became the voice of the Bees for Brooklyn Park High School and later the voice of the Knights. And I still am the voice of the Knights, announcing all kinds of events. I enjoy that. And in fact, I will continue to do that. For over 15 years, I've also been the main TAC rep for the North County High staff, and I serve as the chairperson of the North County High School Faculty Council. Additionally, I serve on the Teacher Association High School Concerns Committee, which meets monthly to discuss specific concerns for high schools. I've been chairman of that for at least 5 years. Finally, I serve on the ASI TAC Advisory Group, which meets monthly with Dr. McMahon and her staff at the board to discuss high school concerns. This is really a very important collaborative group, and I've been honored to be a part of the ASI Advisory Group for at least 5 years. I've worn many hats over the past 48 years, I still do. The one thing, however, that has always guided me is that we must continue and always strive to make the best decisions that we can for the benefit of all of our students, because all of our students have dreams and aspirations. My parents instilled in me the importance of education, and I've always tried to do the same for my students. My experience tells me that if students know that I care about them and their future, and if I respect them, they will reciprocate and they will achieve. The creation of a positive relationship will always result in trust and understanding, and learning can then flourish. The secret to building relationships: caring, nurturing, and respect. I'm also a family man. My wife Linda and I have been married for 51 years.
Wow.
We have 3 children, many grandchildren. My children graduated from Old Mill High School, and I currently have grandchildren that are involved in Glen Burnie High School. And so my roots in District 2 are very strong. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's a brief bio of Robert Silkworth, a 48-year veteran teacher and a family man who's running for the Board of Education in Anne Arundel County District 2 after 48 years for the kids. Thank you.
It's wonderful. You said brief bio, but that bio contained a whole lot of years of experience. And I don't know if you heard out there, he said 48 years. He has been with the Anne Arundel County Public School System. That is amazing, Mr. Silkworth. Thank you so much for sharing. And Mr. Turnage, tell us about you and who you are.
I don't know if I can follow that.
I'm sure you have something wonderful to share.
Yes. Well, good evening, everyone. Mr. Silkworth, before we get started, I like your backdrop there. Palm trees and the water.
He's in the sun.
I'm telling you, man, you can't beat that. At least not now. Okay, well, let's see. At an early age, I'll start with my birth first. I was born in West Baltimore on Payson Street. Lived in West Baltimore for a short period of time, went from there to Fulton Avenue, from Fulton Avenue to Stricker Street, from Stricker Street to Cherry Hill.
Wow.
I stayed in Cherry Hill the first 5 years of my elementary school life. And then we moved into East Baltimore. I finished my last year of elementary school at 149 Elementary in Baltimore, Maryland on Federal and Rutland Avenue. I went to Lumber Junior High School for the 3 years that I was there, and went from there to City College. I graduated from City College in 1968. Mr. Silkworth, I wasn't fortunate enough to go into service, although I did attempt to join. My mother found out that I actually tried to join, and she wrote somebody, and the next thing I knew, I couldn't go because I was the only male in my entire family on my father's side. So at that time, there was no one else to carry the name, and the other guys were too old to do it. So at that time, because I was the only male, I could not, go into service. So my mother was able to stop that. But she also stopped me from going into the FBI and to the city police and anything else like that. Anyway, during that whole time period, from the age of 16 years old, when they first started taking Social Security out on me, I worked in various different capacities, just little stuff in the beginning, carrying groceries, selling newspapers, that sort of thing, until I finished college. And then my first professional job of all things was working for Geno's Incorporated. I did that for roughly 2 years, and then I decided to leave there because I had an offer to work as a production supervisor out here on Telegraph Road at a place called Vector Corporation, which was a division of Chevron Chemical. While there, I was a production supervisor. I had like 50 people in my department that I was supervising on 3 different shifts for 2 or 3 years. I left there because the division moved from Maryland to California, back to California. And so I couldn't afford to go because I was newly married, a new father, you know, that sort of thing, and just getting on my feet. So I couldn't afford to just up and roll my family out here and go to California. Well, that eventually ended up going through a bad kind of relationship there, ended up with a divorce. But shortly after that, my former wife was actually struck and killed on Hospital Drive by a school bus, of all things. Of course, I was notified, and then I had to come and identify the body. That was the worst thing in my life, worst day of my life.
Sure.
Really. Yes. So anyway, long story short, at the age of 43 years old, after working in private industry up until that time, working in, like I said, Geno's, then Vector Corporation, Save-A-Lot Drugs, then Rite Aid Corporation. I worked in Rite Aid as a store manager up until 1985, and then from 85 until 92 as a supervisor in sales, outside sales, for the same company. At the age of 43 years old, I decided that I wasn't doing anything that was positive in the community, and I wasn't giving back anything that had been given to me. So I decided that since I remember as a young kid growing up in Cherry Hill, how the older men took me under their wings and tried to work with me as a young guy to bring me along. There I joined the Scout Troop. I was actively involved in the church in many capacities in the church and that sort of thing. I think scouting was the thing that really opened my eyes a lot about what I could and couldn't do and how successful I could be or not be. In any event, after working there and going to church and all that sort of thing, I decided, like I said, to do something totally different. And I realized the one thing that I was given by so many people that I hadn't been given back was my advice, my wisdom, my tutelage, my experience, and the fact that, you know, I wasn't giving back myself. I didn't do anything that was positive towards the community. So I decided that I wanted to look into education. I took a course at Arundel Community College called Intro to Special Education, or actually Intro to Education. And then the second course I took was Intro to Special Education. I fell in love with special ed. I was offered a job the same week of my father's death in August of 1992. I started working as a provisional special education teacher at Southern High School in South Baltimore, off Hanover and Light Street. Worked there for 6 years as a classroom teacher, teaching math, science, and social studies. Completed that in 1998. Well, of course, I continued taking courses. I'd already finished high school, undergraduate school. Then I decided that since I was going to teach, I had to go back to school and earn another degree. So I went to Coppin State while I was teaching at Southern High School, pursuing my master's degree, completed that in 5 years in the evening, part-time, you know, working full-time during the day as a classroom teacher, part-time at night, going to school, weekends, weekdays, summer months, that sort of thing, in class. Fortunately, I finished in 1998. I applied for an assistant principal's position. I was then assigned to Chicopee Middle School in Northeast Baltimore. I was there for only 1 year when my former principal called and said I want him back at Southern High School. So they transferred me back to Southern High School the very next year. And then while I was en route to go back to the school, I find out that she was transferred.
Oh, wow.
And there was another principal there. anyhow, I served there for about a year and a half before I was then moved again. While I was there, though, they started a principal internship program in Baltimore City. I was one of the first 6 people to attend the program. I was assigned to Roland Park Elementary Middle, and I stayed there for 6 months with Mariel Hardeman, who was the principal at that particular time. I learned a lot there, especially the elementary side of the whole program, because I'd never been involved with elementary students before.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a 6-month period of time that was well spent. Gave me a lot of insight on smaller kids and how to work with them. And then that summer, we were sent to Harvard Principal's School, graduate school for education, and stayed there for about 2 weeks with an intense program. Before we even went to Harvard, though, we had to actually work with many of the professors that had written the books that we had to use for the program.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to prepare to be able to engage with them once we got to Harvard. So it wasn't just a visit to go to the school and say, oh, how you guys doing? Or it's a beautiful campus and all that sort of thing. No, it was very intense work. We had a chance to meet all of the authors who wrote the books that we were assigned to use during that time period, and to get their insights on why they wrote what they did and how they did what they did. And that was an experience that was so valuable. Well, anyway, upon my return from Harvard that summer, I was also assigned to be the summer of review summer school, Polytechnic High School. So I finished up that summer at Poly, then was sent to Falstaff Elementary Middle in Northwest Baltimore, stayed there until November of that month, received a phone call from a director of special education asking me had I completed a master's degree and whether it was in special ed or not. And I said it was in special ed. And he said, had you taught in special ed? Yes, 6 years of experience. He says, well, put your finest suit on and meet me at the board meeting tomorrow night. And I said, board meeting where? And he said, Baltimore City Public Schools. That night I was promoted to principal.
Awesome.
Yeah, so thank you. I was made principal of Woodburn Day School for emotionally disturbed children.
Mm-hmm.
These children really had a ton of issues, from autism to attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and all the behavior disorders that you would encounter, with special needs students for the most part. The autistic spectrum was more of a challenge than anything else. I kind of expected some of the other things that you would normally find with kids with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and that sort of thing. So, but anyway, I did that from 2001 until 2004. I was looking for something else to get involved in. There was something I had my eyes on in the city, but I wasn't available for that at that particular time. So I received a phone call from somebody with the state juvenile services organization with the Maryland State Department of Education. And his name was Dan Otake, and he was the head of HR, and he's still there right to this day. And he wanted me to consider a position as a principal at the Hickey School.
Yes, know it well.
Okay, well, I accepted that position as a principal at Hickey School. I was there from 2005 until 2012. At that time, I retired. But during that time period, while I was there, they had no GED program for the boys that were there. And some of these kids were there much longer than the normal 30-day to 60-day or 90-day period. Many of these kids were there over a year. And I developed this GED program, graduated over 58 students from 2007 until 2012 from that program. And keep in mind, their length of stay was supposed to be 30 days, 30 to 90 days at best. Some of the kids, like I said, for some reasons, they weren't able to place them in placement areas because of their issues or whatever the case may be. I had them there longer. So I had them sign a behavior contract and an academic contract for me, stating that they were not going to get involved in any activities that were negative towards the school and the program or towards staff and teachers, that sort of thing, and that they were going to do their very best to succeed in the program. And they couldn't get involved in any altercations, any verbal cursing and that sort of thing within the program during that time period. And they had to be able to work independently in order to get the job done. And so as they completed the programs, we held traditional commencement activities for these boys with cap and gowns, their parents, their friends. Keep in mind, this is a juvenile facility, locked juvenile facility behind the fence, okay?
Right.
So we had all of these people attend these funerals, I mean, not funerals, but their graduations, plus guest speakers as well. We had food for the boys and the whole 9 yards, and they had a traditional high school diploma as any other high school diploma is given. Some of the kids who had just recently left a particular school were able to graduate from that school. Other youth who were there and had not been in school for any length of time received the Maryland State diploma, and which was just as good. Most of those kids did not recidivate.
Good.
That was the beautiful thing of it all. They did not come back into the system. That was the best part of the whole.
But that's a testament to your leadership.
Yes, I hope it was. I hope it was. Because I really worked hard with those kids.
Good.
You know, because many of those, I tell you, 90% of the boys didn't have fathers at home. 60 to 75% of the students there had IEPs from their previous schools. So most of them were in special education anyway. Many of the kids got in trouble because of their inability to make appropriate decisions at that particular time, and they had no guidance. So when they were retained or detained and brought into the facility, I became like a surrogate father for most of the boys, because instead of having a kid suspended from class for his behavior, whatever the case may be, his suspension was with me. We had to sit in my office, we dialogued, we talked about his behavior, his conduct, what caused it, what he should have done to solve the problem, and that sort of thing. But anyway.
So, Mr. Turnage.
Yes.
You have a lot to say.
Yes.
And it's all good. Well, when I think about you and Mr. Silkworth, both of you bring a wealth of experience in education, a variety of fields. And so why are you running for the school board seat? I heard you say you took a program, you developed a GED program. It was about giving young boys mentorship. Why are you running for a school board candidate? Why should we vote for Mr. Turnage?
Okay, I have 3 grown adults that all graduated from Anne Arundel County Public Schools. 1 from Meade, 2 from Old Mill. The oldest is 45, then 44, and then 41. As a result of those kids graduating and becoming members of a family themselves, now I have grandchildren who are also in Anne Arundel County Public Schools. One who was attending Rippling Woods, and now she's going to middle school, and the other is at Old Mill North. And so I have a vested interest in these kids and making sure they receive a quality education. Okay. And the reason I say that is this. When I was a young guy growing up, I had to deal with racism and bigotry and bullying when I was coming through schools. And this was in the 60s and the 70s and that sort of thing, or actually, 60s and 70s. And so after dealing with all of that, you would think that by this time now, many of those issues would have been dealt with satisfactorily to a point where people are getting along, they're doing the things that they need to do to be successful, and it's not about your skin color and all that sort of thing. It's about you as an individual and what you want and how you plan to get it and how you treat other people. Well, unfortunately, the ugliness of those years have resurfaced.
Yes, they have.
And they are alive and well in our school system, even in Anne Arundel County Public Schools. And I think the latest incidents that have taken place before all of this stuff happened with the COVID virus was in Chesapeake High School and Chesapeake Middle School with the nooses and other kinds of things going on. Well, these things cannot be continued in these schools. We have to deal with those things, bring it out in the open, have meaningful dialogue, to have their parents involved as well as the students. It's not going to be solved with just the students, because this is not learned, this is not innate behavior. This is learned behavior. When these kids come to school with this hate and bigotry and stuff like that, it is coming from home. Most of this stuff is what they see their parents do or what they see others do. but they have to be able to make a concerned individual decision on their own. And that is one of the reasons why I want to run for this position. I want to be on the side of helping make decisions that are going to help promote the growth of these individuals in schools, to make sure that when they graduate, they're coming out with a high school, but they can also go from there to college, not coming out of high school with just a 2.0 average, grade point average, to move on to something better.
Right.
To be able to perform at a much higher level. And one of the ways you do that is, in this particular situation, you are working with the school superintendent to make change. Because change has to be within that group.
That's
in order
right.
to make positive change for the students and the teachers and everyone else in the school system. And now with this COVID, more than anything, we have to protect the kids, to make sure that they are healthy every day, that they're not bringing any viruses to the schools, that the staff aren't getting it, none of the support staff as well as the teachers, counselors, or anyone else in the school gets it. And one of the best decisions that they've made thus far is making sure they open up in this particular setting that they're going to open. But there are pros and cons even about that. It's a very difficult situation.
It is, and I don't mean to cut you off. We'll get to that. I want to give Mr. Silkworth an opportunity to share, why are you running for the school board seat, Mr. Silkworth? Why should the voters vote for you?
Well, thank you. Well, why have I decided to run for the Board of Ed? Well, I've had the honor, as I've said before, of teaching for 48 years, and I still do have that spark that you need to get up every morning to get in, to make a difference in the lives of our kids. I'm often asked, have kids changed over that time? And my answer is generally not so much. What has changed are the challenges that our kids face each and every day in our schools and in their communities.
Correct.
Has teaching changed over the course of my career? Of course it has. But have we made all of the correct changes for the kids? That really is one of the questions. In many schools in District 2 in Anne Arundel County, students have had issues and concerns with racism, poverty, drugs, bullying, family issues. The list goes on and on. Unfortunately, many of our students have fallen into that achievement gap that everyone talks about. There's a lot of talk about it, but there hasn't been a whole lot of success about fixing it. A great deal of time and effort has been spent, yet it still is growing, and it will continue to grow bigger as a result of COVID-19. Closing the gap has been and continues to be a concern. Some years ago, I watched a video by Principal Caffelli, a highly regarded urban educator in New Jersey.
Yes.
Well, he led the turnaround of 4 inner city but different New Jersey urban schools. He's the leading authority for providing effective classroom and school leadership strategies, which is what a board member needs to also do, toward closing what he coined the attitude gap.
Absolutely.
He said that he never worries about the achievement gap. And I've testified many times in the past few years about this. No one seems to be listening. He focuses on the attitude gap. He makes the case that the attitude gap that often affects underperforming students can only be closed if educators first help students develop the will to strive for excellence.
Amen.
He says some of the following things. He says attitude is everything. It determines outcomes. It determines your destiny. It determines whether or not you're going to endure life or simply live day to day. And then he says your attitude will determine your altitude.
Yes.
And in Arundel County, we're trying to elevate all kids. Is that really happening? They're powerful statements. I know, and we all know, that greatness is within all of our kids, but all means all, or does it? We must look at all of our issues with this equity lens. When we do look at everything with an equity lens, all of our kids are going to benefit. According to Mr. Caffelli, educators can achieve remarkable results by focusing on 5 key areas: attitude, relationship, compassion, learning environment, cultural relevance. Oh boy, relevance. Is school relevant today? That's a real big question. I recommend that everyone check out a video on YouTube and search simply, "What is school for?" It's only an 8-minute video, and in this video, a powerful message delivered by whom? By a recent high school graduate. What does he say? He says, "I don't know how to do my taxes. I don't know how to purchase a home or a car, apply for a loan. I don't know anything about investments, building credit, or getting a job. Yet I graduated at the top of my class, and what do I have? This fancy diploma."
Wow.
He goes on to say that the biggest predictor for success is self-control and, oh boy, emotional health. So why are we not taught how to handle stress, he says, how to handle bullies or rejection, anxiety or depression? He tells us that the SAT and the ACT will not determine your LIFE. He certainly is right. He says your destiny is in your hands. You must shape it to be great. Schools, however, unfortunately, are more likely to slam doors in your face rather than open doors. He tells us that there's a difference between people who are smart and people who score better on these tests. He then asked us to imagine a young child sitting in the back of some teacher's class, never raises his hand, fails most of his class. Inside of him, there's this great passion. If it's nurtured, it'll lead him to discover the cure for cancer. But you know what? He says it'll never happen because in class, he was ignored and his worth was judged only by his scores. This made me think of North County freshmen some years ago who came from a family with very caring parents. They nurtured him. Teachers nurtured him. In high school, he developed, as an 11th grader, a specific test for pancreatic cancer that no one across the world had ever done.
Right.
His name was Jack Andraka. He graduated from North County.
Yes,
What if he did not have the good fortune to be nurtured? What is school for? Don't you think it's time that we answer that question? That's kind of why I'm running for the board, so that we can answer some of these questions.
Mr. Silkworth, that was a passionate response. And so you talked a lot about Kafele, and I love Dr. Kafele. He is a man of many words and many smarts.
Yes.
And so you quoted him as he talked about the attitude gap. As a school board member, how would you go about addressing the attitude gap while you're sitting as a school board member?
Well, I think it's, you hear me talk a lot about relationships. Anyone who knows about me recognizes my philosophy. We have to care enough to become involved. And that is whether it's teacher, student, or whether it's teacher, other teachers, or board member and everyone. We need to get to know one another. We need to build solid relationships with one another, share, collaborate. We need to be willing to sit across the table in order to dialogue, and if need be, agree to disagree. I don't know if that's currently happening right now on this board. One of the greatest assets of any large organization that it has is the expertise of that organization. Great things have been happening here in Anne Arundel County for some time, but I think that more greatness is yet to come. We just have to build those relationships with one another. All of our students deserve an answer to that question, what is school for? And I think if we as adults work together for the benefit of our kids, we're going to be able to make some change so that the attitude that is presented by the student when they go into the classroom is such that they're going to soar and they're going to be able to achieve the dreams that they have.
Great. That is wonderful.
It's going to take a lot of work with a lot of people. You know what? I look at it this way. Everyone's been talking about the achievement gap for the past 3, 4, 5, or 10 years, and it's really not working. So maybe we should do as Principal Kafele says, and let's talk about that attitude gap. As a teacher, I can tell you this. Anytime a student comes into my classroom with a very positive attitude, they're going to know that I care about them. I had a young student last year that in September, oh boy, 16-year-old girl, I'm telling you, she was just as angry and she didn't want to listen to me whatsoever. It took all of the whole first semester to get her to realize that I was there for her, that I cared for her, and that I could help her. By the time the semester ended, she was an A student and things had turned around. There's a tremendous amount of power, a tremendous amount of power in the building of relationships. And you know what, for a teacher, that's one of the most difficult things to do. And I always tell young teachers when I mentor them that the first thing that should happen for the first couple of weeks of school, don't worry about your content, worry about building relationships with the kids. That's going to help.
Absolutely. Relationships matter, and they are key. And also in Anne Arundel County, we're not just talking about the attitude gap, but we're also talking about the opportunity gap and making sure that
Yes.
all our children have an opportunity to be successful. And so, Mr. Turnage, I want to turn it over to you because you began to talk about COVID. And so, yes, Anne Arundel County Public Schools has made a decision that we will be going back using virtual instruction. And so what is your view on COVID-19 and Anne Arundel County Public School deciding to do virtual? Do you think there's going to be an impact on opening? What's your view on that?
An impact on opening?
Yes.
Oh, most definitely. First of all things being equal, all the kids should be in a classroom in front of a teacher. That would be the optimal, ideal thing for all the students to be challenged with at this time, being in a classroom with a teacher in front of them. However, because of this virus, and this virus does not discriminate, whether you're a child or you're a young adult or senior, it doesn't really matter. If you're the person that's going to attach itself to, then one of several things will happen to you. Either you'll survive it, or you won't, or you may survive it and have lifelong result of the virus. To let children into the schools right now without a meaningful medical provision to ensure that the students are going to be safe medically, and that's the key, having a vaccine that's going to be something that works for not only the children, but for the adults and all the other staff in the schools, then you're going to have this type of situation, whether you're going to have a hybrid program going on, or you're going to do this this type of program that we have right now, where you're doing virtual instruction.
Google Classroom.
Yes, yes. Now, some of the issues that come with this is that you have students who are homeless. So even if you could provide them with a laptop or Chromebook or whatever you choose to give them, they may not be in a situation where they connect to the internet in any way, shape, or form. So that group of kids are left out completely right now. You may as well forget them.
No, we're not forgetting kids, because in Anne Arundel County, all means all.
No, I don't mean forget them.
Okay.
I'm just saying that for accountability purposes, it's going to be hard to track those kids on a day-to-day basis than you would if a kid is living at home with his mother and his father and that sort of thing, or living someplace with a residency.
Yes.
And many of these kids don't have it. I remember then the 1 year that I was working with Annapolis High School as the principal for the program that was held at Edgewater Sojourner Douglas College.
Yes.
Several of the kids were homeless, and I thought that they were carrying books in their book bags, but they weren't. They were clothes for them to change after class to get back on the bus with something totally different on, because they didn't know where they were going at the end of the day. And so fortunately for the students, they had cell phones. They were able to connect with somebody, so they were told where to meet, X, Y, Z, and they would go to this shelter, this home, that home, and that sort of place, that sort of situation in order to provide shelter for the evening. So that's one critical, one bad situation. Then you have students that attend like a school, Ruth Easton, where they need day-to-day constant kind of work.
Our special centers.
Yeah, special center, because many of these kids, if at best, will learn how to deal with basics in life, to maybe clean up a room or do something around the house, or in some cases, toilet train. It's sad to say, but I've been involved in situations like that where you have kids that we really had to clean because of their inability to make these decisions and control their bodies on their own. Then you have students that are in regular special education classes that are there, and because they have extended school year programs offered to them because they have issues with their learning abilities, inability to learn, and to maintain the academic structure, even throughout the summer, they have the extended school year that takes them through the summer normally. Well, because of COVID right now, that's not existing. It may happen again in the future. We should have had it going through this summer so far, but I can see the challenges that came as a result of COVID because it caught everybody off guard. Nobody knew that this virus was going to create this type of situation at all.
Correct. Yes.
And then, of course, you have the other students who are gifted and talented and that sort of thing, who may begin to lose interest in education because they're being self-taught at home. So the instruction is not there unless the parent is a teacher, former teacher, or somebody who has enough background and the education to be able to work with those kids independently at home. Then you have the situation where you have parents who have to work and cannot leave those kids at home unattended. Somebody has to be there with them. Some of the students are too young to be left alone. Some of them that are old enough to be left alone are not independent enough and strong-willed enough to be able to stick with a rigorous schedule on their own without being provided some kind of support and push by the parent or whoever's there in the house with them. And then, of course, you have the kid who is just going to refuse to do anything. And he's a kid that you're going to have to pull off to the side, continue to work with, like Mr. Silkworth said, and work with and make sure that he understands that he is going to be the one who makes the decision about his life, not somebody else. That he has to be the one that buys into his education and his academic responsibility. That he is going to be the one that's going to be the parent or an older person at some point in life. And what is that life going to look like for him if he's not well educated, not well trained, doesn't have the skill or aptitude to perform a particular job or a skill at the performance level that he's required in order to make a decent income? How is he going to learn how to be a father or a mother or a caregiver or whatever if he can't take responsibility for himself? These are things that teachers and all need to be able to impart to some of these kids. I tell you, one of the things that really gets me is that during this time of the year right now, if I were the school superintendent right now, and if I had my way, and if I could pull it off so everybody has social distancing and all that sort of thing, I would have all the teachers in a summer program to teach them on how to reach these kids. Like I have, Mr. Silkworth has, in order to be able to get these kids to a point where they have a positive attitude towards themselves and education. Learning is not going to take place unless that kid believes in himself. That's got to happen. And you can talk until the cows come home. If that kid doesn't believe in himself, has a negative attitude towards himself and everyone else, then you're not going to be able to impart any kind of academic or anything else to him. So you have to meet him at his level, at his current level of performance. You have to start building him from that point and go forward. I understand the rigors of a curriculum. I understand the rigors of classwork and all that sort of thing. But regardless of how we feel a kid should be in a particular grade level, if his skill base is not strong enough to move from one grade to the next level, we have to build that up to the point that he can move. Otherwise, we're wasting our time. We got professional athletes out here that are just learning how to read and write right now.
You're correct. You know, Mr. Turnage, I have to say you're absolutely correct. And, you know, I will tell you that the concerns that you have about the impact of COVID and us returning is a concern of the superintendent and teachers. And we're not as much control as the county has. We're not going to leave any kid behind. And so all of those groups of kids that you talked about, our special ed and our homeless, I can tell you there are boots on the ground to make sure that those kids get what they need. Thank you for sharing. Mr. Silkworth, what about you? We got COVID going on and we're going back virtual, and what is your view on Anne Arundel County Public Schools and COVID and virtual learning?
Well, you know, this is a very complicated issue because every day brings with it a new surprise and a new challenge. I have to say that last night I got word that a former classmate of mine actually passed away from the COVID virus.
I'm sorry to hear that.
The primary concern for me, of course, is the safety of all of our stakeholders. No one also should be left out of the equation in terms of having input. I've been reading and watching a great deal about what various groups actually think about this, and in a recent board survey, 48% of parents said that they want their children back to school. Well, as a teacher, a parent, and a grandparent, I want them back to school as well. It's a lot more difficult to build those relationships through Google Classroom than it is face-to-face. And, you know, not only are they missing out on educational experiences, they're missing out on the opportunities to grow socially, which is really so important. And for many, this has already caused them anxiety and stress. I recently did a webinar with NEA about reopening schools, and they outlined in the webinar specific conditions which have to exist before we can return safely. And you know, there's probably not a state in the union today that have those conditions, so it's going to be very difficult to get back to a sense of normalcy. Could it happen today? I don't think so. Many people talk about the very low level of risk to our young people. However, many of our stakeholders are not young and will be at risk. And there's been some reports in the news recently about a few schools that have gone back, and already kids have tested positive. In fact, quite a few. We've made the decision in Anne Arundel County, of course, to go back virtually. Well, when we did this back in March, it was very difficult for me to envision a scenario which would allow us to return face-to-face based upon this virus. There are many vaccine trials that are underway as we speak. Most medical people do agree that we will not probably have a vaccine until 2021. Some optimists believe that we might have one in the fall, but who knows? Our president has demanded that we send our students back to school. Well, he and others cite Denmark and Germany because they sent their students back to school in mid-May. Well, if you check the data, it shows that both Denmark and Germany sent their students back to schools when the virus had in fact reached an all-time low. That has not occurred in the United States. In the past few days, or the past few weeks, Maryland, the numbers have just started to skyrocket. I watched with great interest last week that Board of Ed meeting as Dr. Arlada presented his plan. That report from Dr. K was compelling, and I think anybody that watched it would say the same thing. And my hat is off to Dr. Arlada and his staff for their great efforts during this very difficult time. He said in that meeting that we will return in a virtual setting for the beginning of the school year, but he also emphasized the fact that the goal is to get back to a normal school setting ASAP. Now, this probably will mean and involve some hybrid scenarios in which students are brought back based on assessments made in terms of their needs. Well, as a veteran teacher, I have a sense of a few things. I know that distance learning is really difficult for many kids. I know that many of the children during fourth quarter did well, but many did not do so terribly well. I also know that the board made a decision about the grading policy that I think had a very negative impact on student achievement. And thank goodness Dr. Arlada said that for the beginning of the school year, we'll be back to our normal regulations. I think that Dr. Arlada is really working hard, and his staff, and I do believe that consideration still has to be made for all options. Social distancing is the key to stopping the spread of the virus, as is cleanliness and wearing that mask. I do know also that when we return to school in September, and this is the good news, all students have to have a Chromebook with connectivity guaranteed. If a family has 3 students in our schools, then that family has to have 3 Chromebooks. No student should be expected to go to a parking lot to connect. The good news, that is happening in September. There are other things of importance. We need to assess the impact that the pandemic has had on all students with the goal of creating a plan of action to make sure that every student will be able to reach their potential. These assessments might provide insight as to how we should open or modify the opening. Some parents may say, I don't want my kids coming back to school. Some parents might say, I do need my kids back to school.
Right.
Well, we need to be taking a look at all of those situations. There's no magic answer. I think we must continue to take a look at multiple scenarios. There is, as I said earlier, there's power in a positive attitude. We can accomplish almost anything if we set our sights on our goals, and if we plan our work and work our plan. Safety and equity for all of our kids, that is what we must accomplish. Everyone involved must step up to the plate. We must agree to work together for the benefit of our kids because they're the future of this county and this state, and we cannot let them down. You know what? They've always done great things, and they're going to continue to do so. So CDC says distance, deterrence, disinfection, detection. Until all of those things happen, it's going to be very, very difficult for us to go back. You know, I do believe that this pandemic has a positive side, and it has changed the face of education, not just in Anne Arundel County, but across the country.
Absolutely.
And it's been somewhat of a wake-up call. Going back to what I said earlier about what is school for, we have to take a look, because I don't think we've been doing the best for our kids. So we have to take another look at what is our school for, and what's it going to be for the rest of this pandemic, and then what's it going to be for once this is over and we are back face to face. There are a lot of challenges there, and as time goes on and events unfold, you know, we all just have to continue to assess where we are, where we need to go, and God bless everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay connected.
You are absolutely right, Mr. Silkworth. Teamwork makes the dream work. And Anne Arundel County Public Schools, along with the community organizations that want to assist, we're going to get this done. Now, we're not going back to what it was. We are in a new normal. And I will tell you, and I've said this many times with my friends, that COVID has been a blessing and it has been a curse. And the blessing is that we have learned about some out-of-box thinking of how we can do education, how we can be creative. And that's what we'll need teachers to do, right? We'll need teachers to be creative and to continue to think out of the box so that our children can engage, as you say, in a safe manner. And as Mr. Turner says, still getting what they need to be successful. Not just, you know, it's not about grade, but it is about skills, and those skills that they will use to challenge themselves to have successful lives. So thank you, gentlemen. We have about 5 minutes left. I'm going to turn to Mr. Turnage. Mr. Turnage, in 30 seconds. Again, why are we voting for you for candidate for the school board? All right, start that over. We had to unmute you. 30 seconds or less. Why are we voting for you as candidate for the school board?
Well, I feel that I'm fully qualified. I have a vested interest because I have grandkids currently in the school system. I have worked in very difficult situations before. I was dealing with the N1H1 at the Hickey School and how to maintain that and make sure none of our students got sick, as well as the staff. I feel that I'm qualified because, you know, I realize that in order for this to work, not only all of the safe distancing and the mask and that sort of thing issues, but we have issues with ventilation in school. The kids are breathing the same air and that sort of thing, and this stuff does travel through the air. So, you know, you may have a sick kid in the classroom, but that ventilation system may transfer to the next room or somebody else's room. It doesn't really matter. So right now, there's so much we don't know about this COVID. However, I still feel that I want to be on the cutting edge of making decisions that are going to be for the best interests of the students and staff and all the supporting people that work in the schools. And hopefully the outcomes will be positive for all of us. And I know this is a new normal. We'll never return to school as usual.
That's right.
Be something different. And we all have to get used to that. So
thank you, Mr. Turnage. Thank you so much. Mr. Silkworth, 30 seconds or less. Why should we vote for you as school board candidate for District 2?
Well, I hope the people of Anne Arundel County who have trusted me for 48 years to teach their children will trust me to represent District 2 on the Anne Arundel County School Board. For me, that would be an honor and a privilege for sure. I think I do have the experience and the knowledge and hopefully the wisdom to be able to be a productive member of this Anne Arundel County Board of Education, actually from the very first day. I will dedicate myself, of course, to asking the question about what school is compared to what it really should be. As I said earlier, I've been a teacher for 48 years. I know what it is like in the schools from the perspective of a teacher, a student, and an administrator. And honestly, if you take a look at the current board, I think it's been a very difficult, rough transition from appointed to elected school board. As I said, I think I could begin day one without a learning curve. And I have the same spark to be a school board member as I still have to get up in the morning and go teach and make a difference in the lives of our kids. So again, if I'm if I'm given the honor, I will dedicate myself, and I will do my very best to make sure that we make the changes that we need to make, and that all does mean all.
Thank you so much. So you have heard it. You have heard from Mr. Silkworth and Mr. Turnage, District 2 school board candidates. November 3rd is the day. Get out and vote. You have been informed. On behalf of the collective, the Anne Arundel County NAACP, the Anne Arundel County Bay of Jack and Jill, the National 100 Coalition of Black Women, North Arundel County Alumnae Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta, and Zeta Phi Beta Sorority AACo Chapter, on behalf of the collective, this has been your collective group bringing you tabletop discussion for District 2. Good evening, and thank you for joining us.